Back in the 1970s, American gas stations were more famous for their diner treats rather than their fuel. Every station served the best treat in town. Stuckey's was known for pecan log rolls, and Sinclair stations had pie. People came in for gas and stayed for the taste comfort food on a tight budget. Then the kitchens closed and soda fountains went silent. The recipes disappeared with the people who made them. Here are 30 gas station diner treats nobody sells anymore. The glass pie case sat at the counter's edge, spinning slowly on a chrome base that squeaked every third rotation. Inside, under the curved dome, sat the apple pie, lattice top, glistening with sugar crystals, filling dark with cinnamon and cloves. You'd point, and the waitress would cut a wedge thick enough to stand on its own. She'd warm it for 30 seconds in the countertop oven until the edges bubbled. Then pull a scoop of vanilla from the steel tub behind the counter and drop it dead center on the crust. The ice cream melted fast, turning into sweet cream rivers that ran down through the lattice gaps and soaked the flaky bottom layer. You'd taste caramelized apples, brown sugar, butter, and that hint of nutmeg that told you this wasn't store-bought. In 1974, at a Phillips 66 diner outside Tulsa, this cost exactly 50 cents. Truckers ordered it at 2 in the morning after 12-hour hauls. Families split slices on Sunday drives home from church. When gas stations swapped out kitchens for Slim Jim racks in the early 1980s, the pie case disappeared overnight. Your grandpa probably ate this exact dessert while you dozed in the vinyl back seat. The filling was almost black, the kind of dark red that only came from sour cherries cooked down with enough sugar to balance the bite. The crust was hand-crimped at the edges, dusted with coarse sugar that caught the light under the warming lamp. A slice came out on a heavy white plate, still warm from the oven, the filling thick enough to hold its shape when the fork went in. The first bite hit with that sharp cherry tang, then the sweetness, then the butter from the crust. In 1976, at a Sinclair station diner in Wyoming, a slice cost 35 cents. Ranchers stopped in after dawn to eat it with black coffee before heading back out to the fence line. Long-haul drivers ordered it at midnight and ate it standing at the counter. The pie was baked fresh every morning by a woman who had learned the recipe from her mother in the 1940s. When the diner closed in 1982, the recipe went with her. Nobody wrote it down. She didn't think she needed to. The brownie came out of the warmer in a shallow ceramic bowl, edges crisp and center still soft enough to sink a spoon through. The waitress dropped a scoop of vanilla ice cream right on top while the brownie was still hot, and the ice cream started melting immediately, pooling around the sides in sweet white rivers. Then came the chocolate sauce, poured from a small metal pitcher, thick and warm, coating everything. You'd get chocolate, vanilla, and that fudgy brownie texture all in one bite. In 1975, at a Texaco diner in Tennessee, this cost 50 cents. Truckers ordered it after dinner. Families split one between 2 kids. Teenagers ate it on dates, sharing 1 spoon. The brownies were baked in a big sheet pan every afternoon, cut into squares, and kept warm under a heat lamp. When the diner shut down in 1983, the sheet pan went into someone's garage. It's probably still there, covered in dust. Before we move on, the glass dish was wide and shallow, the kind with a short stem and a flat base. The waitress scooped 3 perfect rounds of vanilla ice cream from the steel tub, lined them up in the dish, then reached for the hot fudge warming in a double boiler on the back counter. She poured it slow, letting it ribbon over the ice cream in thick, dark streams that hardened slightly on contact. Whipped cream went on top, piled high from a can that hissed when she pressed the nozzle. A cherry dropped dead center. In 1977, at a Shell diner in Oklahoma, this cost 50 cents. Kids ate it after school. Truckers ordered it at midnight with black coffee. Families shared one after Sunday dinner. The hot fudge was made from scratch every morning, melted chocolate and cream stirred together until it thickened. When the diner closed in 1984, the double boiler stayed on the shelf. Nobody ever came back for it. Three scoops lined up in a long glass boat. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, with a banana sliced down the middle and laid on either side. The waitress worked fast. Chocolate syrup over the vanilla, strawberry topping over the strawberry scoop, crushed pineapple over the chocolate. Whipped cream piled on top of each scoop, 3 separate peaks, and then 3 cherries, 1 per peak. Chopped peanuts scattered over everything. In 1978, at a Mobile diner in Florida, this cost 75 cents. Families ordered one and passed it around with 5 spoons. Teenagers ate them on Friday nights after football games. Truckers never ordered them, too sweet, too much, but kids did, and they remembered them for decades. The banana splits were made to order, assembled right at the counter where you could watch every step. When the diner closed in 1985, the long glass boats went into storage. Nobody makes them like that anymore. A glass pie case under a warming light, a soda fountain with metal levers. A waitress who knew your order before you said it. That was the 1970s gas station diner. When interstates rerouted traffic and convenience stores replaced kitchens, these desserts disappeared. But people still remember every bite. Many of you have been asking where to find these recipes. We've gathered hundreds of them from the Depression era through the 1970s in our cookbook, Grandma's Kitchen. Complete instructions, pro tips in 10 chapters. Link is in the description below. Now, let's get back to the video. The smell hit you before you even opened the diner door. Sweet, yeasty, warm, drifting out through the screen and into the parking lot. The donuts were made every morning in a deep fryer behind the counter, dropped into hot oil in small batches, flipped once with a long wooden stick, and pulled out golden. They went onto a wire rack to cool for 30 seconds, then got dipped in a thin sugar glaze that hardened into a shiny shell. In 1975, at an Esso diner in West Virginia, a donut cost 15 cents. Coal miners bought half a dozen on their way to the morning shift. Truckers ate 3 with black coffee at 4 a.m. Kids got one on the way to school, still warm, wrapped in wax paper. The fryer ran from 5 a.m. until noon, and when it stopped, the donuts were gone. When the diner closed in 1983, the fryer went to a yard sale. Nobody ever bought it. The cobbler came out in a shallow bowl, still bubbling at the edges, the crust golden and cracked where the peach filling had pushed through. The waitress let it sit for a minute so you wouldn't burn your tongue, then dropped a scoop of vanilla ice cream right on top. The ice cream melted fast, turning into cream that mixed with the warm peach syrup and soaked into the crust. You'd get peaches, cinnamon, butter, and cold vanilla all in 1 spoonful. In 1976, at a Phillips 66 diner in Georgia, This cost 50 cents. Farm workers ate it after lunch. Truckers ordered it in the middle of the afternoon when the diner was empty. Families ate it on Sunday after church. The cobbler was baked fresh every morning in a big rectangular pan, scooped to order, and served warm. When the diner shut down in 1984, the pan stayed in the kitchen. It's probably still there. The meringue stood 3 inches tall, toasted gold at the peaks, soft and sweet all the way through. Underneath was a thick layer of coconut custard, pale yellow and smooth as silk, studded with shredded coconut that had been toasted lightly in the oven before it went into the filling. The crust was graham cracker, pressed thin and baked until it held together without crumbling. A slice came out cold from the glass front cooler, the kind with a sliding door on the back. In 1975, at a Texaco diner in Louisiana, this cost 35 cents. Families ordered it after Sunday lunch. Truckers ate it with iced tea on hot July afternoons when the air conditioning barely worked. The meringue was made fresh every morning, whipped by hand with a rotary beater until the peaks stood stiff. When the diner shut down in 1983, the beater went to Goodwill. The recipe stayed in someone's head and never made it to paper. The meringue was toasted at the tips, soft and cloud-like, piled high enough that it wobbled when the waitress set the plate down. Underneath was a layer of lemon custard so tart it made your mouth pucker, balanced by enough sugar to keep you coming back for another bite. The crust was buttery and golden, sturdy enough to hold the weight without going soggy. In 1973, at a Mobile diner in New Jersey, a slice cost 35 cents. Construction workers ate it on their lunch break, sitting at the counter with their hard hats on the stool next to them. Retirees ordered it with decaf at 2 in the afternoon when the place was quiet. The lemon filling was made from scratch every morning, whisked over a double boiler until it thickened, then poured into the crust while it was still hot. When the diner shut down in 1984, the double boiler went into storage. It's probably still there. The filling was almost black, thick as tar, sweet enough to make your teeth ache if you ate too fast. Pecans floated on top in a perfect spiral, toasted until they smelled like butter and smoke. The crust underneath was thin and flaky, soaking up the syrup without falling apart. A slice came out on a white plate with a paper doily underneath, the kind that stuck to the bottom if you weren't careful. In 1977, at a Shell Station diner in Georgia, this cost 35 cents. Farm workers ate it after dawn with coffee so strong it left a ring in the cup. Salesmen ordered it mid-afternoon when the drive between towns felt longer than it was. The pie was made with sorghum syrup and dark corn syrup, no molasses, because that's how they did it in the South. When the diner closed in 1981, the recipe went into a shoebox with 50 others. Nobody ever opened the box again. Every slice was cut by hand. Every scoop came from a steel tub. Every donut was fried that morning. Gas station diners didn't sell convenience, they sold comfort. When the last pie case got unplugged in the mid-1980s, an entire generation of road food vanished. These next 20 prove it. Nobody made banana cream pie like the woman at that Sinclair diner in Kansas. She'd start with a pre-baked crust, golden and flaky, cooled on a wire rack while she cooked the custard on the stove. Egg yolks, sugar, milk, and cornstarch went into a heavy saucepan, whisked constantly over medium heat until the mixture thickened into something smooth and pale yellow. She'd slice bananas thick, layer them into the crust, then pour the warm custard over them, smoothing it with a rubber spatula so every gap was filled. Whipped cream went on top, piled high and soft, covering the whole surface in a gentle dome. The pie went into the glass front cooler for at least 2 hours before it was ready to serve. In 1974, a slice cost 35 cents. Truckers ate it at midnight with black coffee, scraping the plate clean with the side of their forks. Families ordered it after Sunday dinner, splitting one slice between 2 kids who fought over the last bite. Retirees came in mid-afternoon for a slice and a cup of decaf, sitting at the same counter stool every single time. The pie was made fresh every Tuesday and Friday, and by Saturday morning it was always gone. When the diner closed in 1982, the recipe stayed with her. She never wrote it down. Nobody asked her to. She moved to Colorado in 1983 and never made another banana cream pie again. Nobody in Kansas makes it like that anymore. The double boiler never went cold. From 6 in the morning until 10 at night, that small metal pitcher of butterscotch sauce sat in hot water on the back counter, kept warm and ready for the next order. When you asked for a butterscotch sundae, the waitress scooped 2 perfect rounds of vanilla ice cream into a shallow glass dish, then poured the sauce over them in a slow, steady stream. The sauce was thick and golden, the color of old honey, with a flavor that hit somewhere between brown sugar and burnt caramel. It pooled at the bottom of the dish and coated every curve of the ice cream. Whipped cream went on top, a generous dollop from the can, then a single cherry dropped dead center. In 1976, at a Mobile diner in Indiana, this cost 45 cents. Kids ordered it after school, sitting at the counter with their backpacks on the floor beside them. Truckers ate it at 3 in the morning when nothing else sounded good and the coffee had gone cold in the cup. Families shared one on road trips when the budget was tight, and one sundae had to stretch between 3 people with 3 spoons. The butterscotch was made from scratch every morning. Butter, brown sugar, heavy cream, and a pinch of salt, stirred slowly over low heat until it thickened and turned glossy. When the diner shut down in 1983, the recipe went with the cook who had made it for 9 years. Nobody thought to ask for it before she left. June was strawberry shortcake season. That's when the roadside stand sold berries for $1 a quart, and the woman who ran the Esso Diner in North Carolina bought 10 quarts every Monday and Thursday. She'd slice them thick, toss them with sugar, and let them sit for at least an hour until they released their juice and turned glossy and red. The biscuits were made from scratch that morning. Flour, butter, milk, and a touch of sugar mixed in a big metal bowl, patted out by hand, and cut into rounds with the rim of a drinking glass. They were baked in a hot oven until the tops were golden and the insides were tender and flaky. When an order came in, she'd split a biscuit in half while it was still warm, spoon strawberries onto the bottom half, place the top half on next, add more strawberries, then finish with a generous dollop of whipped cream that melted slightly into the warm biscuit and mixed with the strawberry juice. 1975, this cost 50 cents. Farm families ordered it after church on Sundays. Truckers ate it in the late afternoon when the lunch rush was over and the diner was quiet. Kids got it as a special treat on Saturday mornings after helping their parents with errands. The biscuits were made fresh every day, never from a mix. When the diner closed in 1984, the cast-iron biscuit pan went into storage in someone's basement. It's probably still there, covered in dust. The peanuts came first. Every week the cook roasted a 5-pound bag of raw peanuts in the oven, salted them lightly while they were still warm, and kept them in a big glass jar by the register where everyone could see them. When someone ordered a tin roof sundae, the waitress would scoop 2 perfect rounds of vanilla ice cream into a shallow glass dish, pour warm chocolate sauce over them in thick, uneven ribbons that hardened slightly on contact with the cold ice cream, then grab a handful of those roasted peanuts and scatter them on top. She'd press a few into the ice cream so they stuck. Whipped cream and a cherry finished it off. Name came from the look. Chocolate sauce drizzled over vanilla ice cream, then covered with peanuts that looked like shingles on a tin roof when you looked at it from the side. In 1977, at a Shell diner in Missouri, this cost 45 cents. Truckers ordered it after dinner, eating it slowly with a long spoon while they finished their coffee and talked to the waitress about the weather. Kids ate it on Saturday afternoons, sitting in the vinyl booths with their legs swinging under the table. Retirees came in at 2 in the afternoon for one with decaf, sitting at the counter where they could watch the traffic go by outside. The chocolate sauce was made every morning from cocoa powder, sugar, and heavy cream, stirred until it thickened and turned glossy. When the diner closed in 1985, the peanut jar stayed on the counter for months. Nobody ever came back for it. The saucepan was always the same, heavy-bottomed, wide enough for a whisk to move freely, kept on the back burner where the heat was even. The cook would pour whole milk into it, add cocoa powder, sugar, and egg yolks, then stand there stirring constantly with a wooden spoon until the mixture thickened into a glossy, dark custard that coated the back of the spoon. It took about 15 minutes if the heat was right, longer if it wasn't. When it was ready, she'd pour it into a pre-baked pie shell, still warm, and leave it to cool in the glass front cooler for at least 2 hours until it set firm. Whipped cream went on top just before serving, piled high and soft, sometimes dusted with a light shake of cocoa powder for decoration. The crust was buttery and golden, made with lard and flour, rolled thin and crimped at the edges by hand. In 1975, at a Texaco diner in Alabama, a slice cost 35 cents. Truckers ordered it at midnight with black coffee, eating it in 3 bites while standing at the counter waiting for their thermos to be refilled. Families ate it after Sunday lunch, splitting one slice between the kids who argued over who got the bigger piece. Teenagers came in after school and ordered it with a tall glass of cold milk. The pie was made fresh every Wednesday and Saturday morning, and by Monday afternoon it was always gone. When the diner shut down in 1983, the recipe stayed in the cook's head. She moved to Florida that same year and never made it again. Truckers knew which exits had real food. Families planned trips around certain diners. Kids remembered specific Sundays decades later. That's what gas station desserts meant in the 70s. When the last oven shut off and freezers emptied out, nobody saved the recipes. Here's what we lost next. The smell hit you before you even reached the door. Cinnamon, butter, and sugar baking together in a hot oven, drifting out through the screen and into the parking lot where the gas pumps were. By the time you walked inside, the first batch was already out, cooling on wire racks on the back counter. The dough was made from scratch every morning. Flour, yeast, milk, eggs, and butter mixed in a big metal bowl. left to rise under a clean kitchen towel for an hour, then rolled out into a rectangle on a floured countertop. Cinnamon sugar was spread across the surface, thick enough that you could see the texture, mixed with a touch of brown sugar that caramelized during baking and turned sticky and dark. The dough was rolled tight, cut into thick rounds with a serrated knife, and placed close together in a sheet pan so they rose into each other as they baked. Cream cheese icing was drizzled over the top while the rolls were still warm, melting into the crevices and pooling around the sides. In 1976, at a Phillips 66 diner in Ohio, this cost 40 cents. Truckers ate them with black coffee at 5 in the morning, pulling them apart with their hands and licking the icing off their fingers. Kids got them on Saturday mornings as a treat, sitting at the counter with a glass of cold milk. Families ordered 2 and split them 4 ways, everyone fighting over the sticky centerpiece. When the diner closed in 1984, the sheet pan went into someone's basement. The metal mixing bowl was older than the diner itself. Wide, deep, with a handle on one side and a pouring spout on the other, it had been bought at a yard sale in 1968 and used every Tuesday and Friday for the next 14 years. That's when the cook made banana pudding from scratch, whole milk, sugar, egg yolks, cornstarch, and a splash of vanilla extract cooked together on the stove, stirred constantly with a whisk until the mixture thickened into a smooth, pale yellow custard. Vanilla wafers were layered into a glass baking dish, then banana slices cut thick so they didn't turn brown too fast, then a layer of warm pudding poured over them, smoothing out to the edges. Another layer of wafers, more bananas, more pudding, and so on until the dish was full. The top layer was always pudding, sometimes topped with whipped cream, sometimes left plain. It was covered with plastic wrap and left to chill in the cooler for at least 3 hours before serving. In 1974, at a Mobile diner in Mississippi, this cost 40 cents for a bowl served cold with a long spoon. Truckers ordered it after lunch, eating it slowly while they read the newspaper at the counter. Families ate it on Sunday afternoons, sharing one big bowl between 4 people with 4 spoons. Kids got it as dessert after school, sitting in the vinyl booths with their homework spread out on the table. The pudding never lasted more than 2 days. When the diner closed in 1982, the mixing bowl stayed in the kitchen, and the recipe went with the cook. The cobbler pan was always the same, wide, shallow, ceramic, with a flat bottom and a rim just high enough to hold the filling without it bubbling over. The cook would line the bottom with blackberries, fresh in summer, frozen the rest of the year, toss them with sugar and a touch of cornstarch, then top them with a biscuit dough dropped in rough spoonfuls across the surface. It baked for 35 minutes at 375 degrees until the top was golden and the filling bubbled up through the cracks. When an order came in, the waitress would scoop a portion into a shallow ceramic bowl, let it sit for a minute so it wouldn't burn anyone's tongue, then drop a scoop of vanilla ice cream right on top. The ice cream melted immediately, turning into sweet cream that mixed with the warm blackberry syrup and soaked into the biscuit topping. You'd get tart blackberries, sugar, butter, and cold vanilla all in one spoonful. In 1977, at a Shell diner in Arkansas, this cost 50 cents. Farm families ate it after Sunday dinner, sitting in the booths with the windows open and the fans running. Truckers ordered it in the late afternoon when the diner was quiet and the lunch rush was long over. The blackberries were picked locally every June and July, frozen in batches, and used all year. When the diner closed in 1985, the freezer stayed full of berries for months. Nobody ever came back for them. The cobbler pan sat in the kitchen until someone threw it away. The fryer was on by 5 in the morning, deep, heavy, filled with lard that had been strained and reused for weeks. It sat on the back counter next to the griddle and stayed hot until noon. The dough for the pies was rolled thin, cut into circles with a saucer, and filled with apple, cherry, or peach filling that had been cooked down with sugar and cinnamon until it was thick enough to hold its shape. The edges were crimped with a fork, and the whole thing was dropped into the hot oil and fried until golden, about 3 minutes per side. They came out crisp on the outside, soft and sweet on the inside, and were dusted with cinnamon sugar while still hot. In 1978, at a Sinclair diner in Kentucky, a fried pie cost 30 cents. Truckers bought 3 at a time and ate them in the cab while they drove. The wax paper crumpled on the dash. Kids got them after school, walking home with the pie still warm in their hands. Families ordered half a dozen on Friday nights to take home for the weekend. The pies were made fresh every morning, fried to order, and sold out by noon. If you came in after 1 o'clock, they were gone. When the diner closed in 1983, the fryer stayed on the counter for 2 years until someone hauled it away. The dough recipe was never written down. The woman who made it moved to Ohio and never fried another pie. Nobody asked her why. The pineapple topping sat in a wide-mouthed jar on the back counter, thick and golden, with chunks of fruit suspended in sweet syrup that had been cooked down with sugar and cornstarch until it thickened. When someone ordered a pineapple sundae, the waitress would scoop 2 perfect rounds of vanilla ice cream into a shallow glass dish, spoon the pineapple over them, letting the syrup run down the sides and pool at the bottom, then top it with whipped cream and a cherry. The topping was made in-house every week, canned pineapple chunks drained, the juice reserved, then cooked with sugar and cornstarch until it turned glossy and thick. The chunks were stirred back in at the end, and the whole thing was left to cool before being transferred to the jar. In 1976, at a Texaco diner in California, this cost 45 cents. Truckers ordered it after dinner, eating it slowly while they read the newspaper and drank their coffee. Families ate it on hot summer afternoons when the air conditioning barely worked and the vinyl seats stuck to the backs of your legs. Kids got it as a reward for good behavior on long road trips, sitting at the counter with their feet dangling off the stool. The pineapple topping lasted about a week in the cooler before it was gone. When the diner shut down in 1984, the recipe was taped inside a kitchen cabinet. Nobody ever found it. The jar sat on the counter for months, then disappeared. Warm cobblers bubbling at the edges, cold pudding straight from the cooler. Donuts fried at dawn every single morning. These weren't grab-and-go snacks. They were sit-down desserts made by hand and served on real plates. When gas stations became convenience stores, everything changed. These final 10 prove it. The pot was always on the back burner, simmering low from the moment the diner opened until someone ordered the last bowl. Rice pudding wasn't baked in the oven like most people do it today. It was cooked on the stove, slow and steady, stirred every few minutes so it didn't stick to the bottom. The cook started with long-grain white rice, cooked in whole milk with sugar, a pinch of salt, and a cinnamon stick that floated on top while everything simmered together. After about 40 minutes, the rice would soften and the milk would thicken into something creamy and rich. She'd pull the cinnamon stick out, stir in a handful of raisins, and let it cool slightly before ladling it into bowls. Some people ate it warm. Others wanted it cold, straight from the cooler, with a spoonful of whipped cream on top. In 1974, at a Phillips 66 diner in Montana, a bowl cost 35 cents. Truckers ordered it at midnight with black coffee, eating it slowly while they filled out their logbooks at the counter. Families ate it on Sunday afternoons, sharing one big bowl between the kids who argued over who got the most raisins. Retirees came in at 2 in the afternoon for a bowl with decaf, sitting at the same stool every time, reading the newspaper while they ate. The rice pudding was made fresh every morning, and whatever was left at closing went into the cooler for the next day. It never lasted more than 2 days. The pot it was cooked in was older than the diner itself, heavy cast aluminum with a handle that had been wrapped in electrical tape because the original grip had worn off years earlier. When the diner closed in 1982, the pot stayed on the stove for weeks. Nobody came back for it. The recipe was never written down. The cook who made it for 11 years moved to Wyoming in 1983 and took a job at a truck stop that didn't serve rice pudding. She never made it again. Nobody asked her to. 30 years later, people who grew up eating it still talk about that rice pudding like it was something sacred. They remember the taste, sweet, creamy, with just enough cinnamon to make it interesting. They remember the texture, soft rice, plump raisins, thick milk that coated the spoon. They remember sitting at that counter, eating it slowly, feeling like they had all the time in the world. That's what gas station diner food was. It gave you time. It made you slow down. And when it disappeared, nobody replaced it with anything that mattered. The name came from the look. Dark, dense, layered, rich enough to make your teeth ache if you ate it too fast. Mississippi mud pie wasn't a single thing. It was a construction project. The base was a chocolate cookie crust, crushed Oreos, mixed with melted butter, pressed into a pie tin, and baked until it set firm. Then came the first layer, chocolate pudding, made from scratch with cocoa powder, sugar, egg yolks, and milk, cooked on the stove until it thickened, poured into the crust while it was still warm. That layer went into the cooler for at least an hour to set. Then came the second layer, whipped cream mixed with a little powdered sugar spread thick across the top of the pudding layer. Then the final touch, chocolate shavings, curls of dark chocolate scraped off a bar with a vegetable peeler scattered across the whipped cream like they'd been tossed there by accident. The whole thing went back into the cooler for another hour before it was ready to serve. In 1977, at a Shell diner in Mississippi, a slice cost 50 cents. Families ordered it after Sunday dinner, splitting one slice between 3 people because it was too rich to eat alone. Truckers never ordered it. It was too sweet, too heavy, too much for a man who still had 6 hours of driving ahead of him. But kids loved it. Teenagers came in after football games and ordered it with Coke. Women came in on Saturday afternoons and ate it with decaf, sitting in the vinyl booths with their shopping bags on the seat next to them. The pie was made fresh every Wednesday and Saturday, and by Monday morning it was always gone. When the diner closed in 1985, the recipe stayed with the woman who made it. She never wrote it down. She moved to Tennessee that same year and took a job at a Waffle House that didn't serve mud pie. Nobody ever asked her why. 40 years later, people who grew up eating it still describe it in detail. The crunch of the crust, the smoothness of the pudding, the lightness of the whipped cream, the bitterness of the chocolate shavings. They remember exactly how it tasted. They remember exactly how it felt to eat it. And they remember that nothing they've eaten since has ever come close. Key lime pie wasn't supposed to be at gas station diners. It was a Florida thing, a coastal thing, a specialty dessert you got at seafood restaurants and beachside cafes. But somewhere in the mid-1970s, it started showing up at diners attached to gas stations along the Gulf Coast, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, and once it showed up, it never left. The filling was simple: key lime juice, sweetened condensed milk, and egg yolks whisked together until smooth, poured into a graham cracker crust, and baked just long enough to set. No meringue, no whipped cream, just the filling and the crust served cold, sliced thin because it was rich and tart, and a little went a long way. In 1978, at a Texaco diner in Pensacola, a slice cost 40 cents. Tourists ordered it because they thought they were supposed to. Locals ordered it because they knew it was good. Truckers didn't order it at all. It was too fancy, too different, too far from what they wanted after a long haul. But families loved it. Kids ate it on hot summer afternoons when the air conditioning barely worked and the vinyl seats stuck to the backs of their legs. Retirees came in at 2 in the afternoon and ate it with iced tea, sitting at the counter and watching the traffic go by outside. The pie was made fresh every Tuesday and Friday, and it never lasted more than 3 days. The key lime juice came in bottles, not fresh. Real key limes were expensive and hard to find outside of Florida, so most diners used bottled juice, and nobody complained. The crust was made from scratch, graham crackers crushed in a plastic bag with a rolling pin mixed with melted butter and a little sugar pressed into a pie tin by hand. Sweet potato pie was a Southern thing. Sweet potatoes boiled until soft, mashed smooth with a fork, mixed with sugar, eggs, milk, butter, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a touch of vanilla extract. The mixture was poured into a pre-baked pie shell and baked until the center set firm and the top turned golden. It came out of the oven smelling like Thanksgiving, even in July. In 1976, at a mobile diner in South Carolina, a slice cost 35 cents. Farm families ate it after church on Sundays, sitting in the booths with their Bibles on the table. Truckers ordered it at midnight with black coffee, eating it slowly while they waited for their thermos to be refilled. Kids ate it after school. The pie was made fresh every Monday and Thursday, and by Saturday it was always gone. The sweet potatoes were boiled in a big pot on the stove, peeled by hand, and mashed in a metal bowl with a fork. No food processor, no mixer, just a fork and a strong arm. They remember the taste: sweet, spiced, rich, smooth. That's what sweet potato pie was. It was home. And when it disappeared, nobody bothered to replace it with anything that mattered. Chess pie was old, older than gas stations, older than diners, older than the interstate highway system. It came from the South, from farm kitchens and church socials and Depression-era cookbooks. The filling was nothing but sugar, eggs, butter, a little flour, a little cornmeal, and a splash of vinegar or lemon juice to cut the sweetness. That's it. No fruit, no chocolate, no cream. Just those 6 ingredients whisked together, poured into a pie shell, and baked until the top turned golden and the center set firm, but still had a little jiggle when you shook the pan. In 1975, at an Esso diner in Tennessee, a slice cost 35 cents. Truckers ordered it with black coffee at 2 a.m. The pie was made fresh every Wednesday and Saturday, and it never lasted more than 3 days. The recipe was so simple that nobody bothered to write it down. Every cook in the South knew how to make chess pie. You didn't need a cookbook. You didn't need measurements. You just knew. When the diner closed in 1982, the recipe stayed in the cook's head. She moved to North Carolina and never made chess pie again. Nothing was prepackaged. Nothing came frozen. Every pie was baked in that kitchen. Every filling was stirred by hand. Every crust was crimped with a fork. Gas station diners served real food until the day they locked the doors. Then the recipes disappeared with the people who knew them. Here are the last 5. Apple cobbler was different from apple pie. Pie had a bottom crust and a top crust, and the apples were sliced thin and arranged in layers. Cobbler had no bottom crust, just apples tossed with sugar and cinnamon, poured into a baking dish, and topped with a biscuit dough dropped in rough spoonfuls across the surface. It baked until the apples bubbled and the biscuit topping turned golden and crisp at the edges. When an order came in, the waitress would scoop a portion into a shallow bowl, let it sit for a minute so it wouldn't burn anyone's tongue, then drop a scoop of vanilla ice cream right on top. The ice cream melted immediately, turning into sweet cream that mixed with the warm apple syrup and soaked into the biscuit topping. You'd get apples, cinnamon, butter, and cold vanilla all in one spoonful. The apples were peeled and sliced by hand every morning. Sweet apples, buttery biscuit, cold ice cream. They remember the texture. Soft apples, crisp topping, melting cream. They remember sitting in that diner, eating it slowly, feeling like they had all the time in the world. That's what apple cobbler was. It was time. Chocolate pudding wasn't fancy. It wasn't layered or topped with whipped cream or served in a fancy glass. It came in a shallow bowl, cold from the cooler, with a spoon stuck in the side. That's it. But it was made from scratch every morning in a big metal pot on the stove, cocoa powder, sugar, cornstarch, egg yolks, and whole milk whisked together over medium heat, stirred constantly with a wooden spoon until the mixture thickened into something smooth and glossy and dark. It took about 15 minutes if the heat was right, longer if it wasn't. When it was ready, the cook would pour it into individual bowls, cover each one with plastic wrap pressed directly onto the surface so it wouldn't form a skin, and put them in the cooler for at least 2 hours before serving. In 1974, at a Sinclair diner in Kansas, a bowl cost 30 cents. Kids ordered it after school, eating it slowly with a long spoon while they waited for their parents to pick them up. Truckers ate it at 3 a.m. with black coffee, sitting at the counter and reading the newspaper while they waited for their food to come up. Families ordered it after Sunday dinner, sharing bowls between the kids who fought over who got to scrape the bottom. The pudding was made fresh every morning, and whatever was left at closing went into the cooler for the next day. It never lasted more than 2 days. Bread pudding was the dish you made when you had bread that was too old to serve but too good to throw away. Day-old roll, leftover biscuits, slices of white bread that had been sitting in the bread box for 3 days, they all went into a big metal bowl, torn into rough pieces by hand. Eggs, milk, sugar, vanilla extract, and a handful of raisins were whisked together in a separate bowl, then poured over the bread and left to soak for at least 30 minutes until the bread absorbed the custard and turned soft. The whole thing was poured into a greased baking dish and baked for 45 minutes until the top turned golden and the custard set firm. It came out of the oven smelling like cinnamon and vanilla and butter all at once. A scoop was served warm in a shallow bowl, sometimes with a drizzle of vanilla sauce made from milk, sugar, and vanilla extract cooked together on the stove until it thickened. In 1976, at a Mobile diner in Louisiana, this cost 40 cents. Truckers ordered it at midnight with black coffee, eating it slowly while they filled out their logbooks at the counter. Families ate it after Sunday dinner, sharing one big bowl between the kids with 4 spoons. Retirees came in at 2 in the afternoon for a serving with decaf, sitting at the counter and talking to the waitress about their grandchildren. Bread pudding was made twice a week, always on Tuesday and Friday, and it never lasted more than 2 days. Blueberry buckle wasn't a pie, wasn't a cobbler, wasn't a cake. It was somewhere in between, a thick, buttery batter poured into a baking pan topped with fresh blueberries, then covered with a crumb topping made from flour, butter, and sugar worked together with your fingers until it formed coarse crumbs. It baked for 45 minutes at 350 degrees until the blueberries burst and the crumb topping turned golden and crisp. It came out of the oven smelling like butter and berries and sugar all at once. A square was cut and served warm in a shallow bowl, sometimes with a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top, sometimes with whipped cream, sometimes plain. In 1978, at a Shell diner in Maine, this cost 50 cents. Farm families ordered it after Sunday dinner, sitting in the booths with their jackets still on because the air conditioning was too cold. Truckers ate it in the late afternoon when the diner was quiet and the lunch rush was long over. Kids got it as dessert after school, sitting at the counter with a glass of cold milk and their homework spread out on the table. The blueberries were bought fresh from a local farm every Monday and Thursday during the summer, and when fresh berries weren't available, frozen ones were used instead. Crumb topping was made fresh every morning. Flour, butter, sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon worked together by hand until it formed pea-sized clumps. Butterscotch pie was the last pie in the case. By the time Sunday afternoon rolled around, the apple pie was gone, the cherry pie was gone, the lemon meringue was gone, and all that was left was butterscotch. Nobody ordered it first. It was the pie you settled for when everything else was sold out. The people who ordered it never regretted it. The filling was made from scratch: brown sugar, butter, cornstarch, egg yolks, and milk cooked together on the stove until it thickened into something smooth and glossy and the color of old honey. It was poured into a pre-baked pie shell and left to cool in the glass front cooler for at least 2 hours until it set firm. Whipped cream went on top just before serving, piled high and soft, sometimes dusted with a little cinnamon for decoration. In 1975, at a Texaco diner in Iowa, a slice cost 35 cents. Truckers ordered it at 2 a.m. with black coffee eating it slowly while they waited for their thermos to be refilled. Families ate it after Sunday dinner, splitting one slice between the kids who didn't really want it but ate it anyway because it was there. Retirees came in at mid-afternoon for a slice with decaf, sitting at the counter and reading the newspaper while they ate. The pie was made fresh every Wednesday and Saturday, and it was always the last one to sell out. When the diner closed in 1983, the recipe stayed with the cook who had made it for 8 years. She never wrote it down. She moved to Nebraska and took a job at a nursing home that served prepackaged dessert cups. She never made butterscotch pie again. Nobody asked her to. 40 years later, people who grew up eating it still talk about it like it was something they'd forgotten and then suddenly remembered. They describe the taste: sweet, buttery, rich, with a hint of caramel. They describe the texture: smooth, firm, creamy. They remember sitting in that diner, eating it slowly, feeling like they'd discovered something nobody else appreciated. That's what butterscotch pie was. It was underappreciated, and when it disappeared, nobody noticed until it was too late. That's how gas station diner desserts ended. Not with a bang, just with an empty pie case and a locked door. Your grandfather knew which exits had the best pie. Your grandmother remembered which diners made donuts fresh every morning. Your parents planned road trips around certain gas stations because the food was worth the stop. That's what America looked like in the 1970s. Gas stations weren't just places to fill your tank. They were places to sit down, eat something real, and take a breath before you got back on the road. The waitress knew your name. The coffee was always hot. The pie case spun under a chrome dome, and every slice was cut by hand. Then the interstates rerouted the traffic. The chains moved in with their plastic-wrapped snacks and microwaved sandwiches. The gas companies realized they could make more money selling convenience than comfort. One by one, the diners closed. The ovens went cold. The soda fountains were unplugged. The pie cases were hauled away. And the recipes? Most of them were never written down. They stayed in the heads of the women who made them, and when those women moved on or retired or passed away, the recipes went with them. Nobody thought to ask. Nobody thought they needed to. Everyone assumed the food would always be there, but it wasn't. And now it's gone. These 30 desserts fed truckers, families, road trippers, and kids on their way home from school. They were made with real ingredients, real time, and real care. They weren't fancy, they weren't expensive, but they mattered. If you remember eating any of these, drop a comment below and tell us which one. If your grandparents ever stopped at a gas station diner, share this video with them. And if you want to see more forgotten foods that deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button, because the food might be gone, but the memory isn't. Not yet.